Hello everybody, it's jrobi. Got another Grandmaster Chess Tactics video I'd like to do today, and this took place in 1857 in New York, and it was a match between Paul Morphy as black and Louis Paulsen as white, and it's black to move. So if you want to pause the video and see if you can come up with the Grandmaster line, definitely go ahead and do so. White has just played queen down to a6, hoping to get a queen trade, but Morphy found something much more powerful and strong in this position. So definitely pause the video, see if you can find it out, and we'll get into it here. What I'll do is I'll go through the lines from the game itself, and then we'll take a look at some variations. Now I want to preface things before I get started. The reason I'm posting this video on the Morphy game is I had a subscriber email me today and ask if I could put a Morphy database up on my site, and I have to admit that I'm not really familiar with a lot of Paul Morphy's games, so I kind of looked into it as I was getting that information onto jrobichess.com, and found out that he's got a very interesting story to him. He is known as quite possibly the first modern style chess player, even though he was playing in the 1800s, and he's known quite often for very sharp attacking tactics that he liked to use and used very well, and this game is one of his classics. So from this position, it's black to move. Morphy came up with just a crushing tactical line, and he comes in and he takes the bishop with his queen on f3. So he's sacrificing the queen. White recaptures, and now Morphy's going to unleash an attack that just cannot be stopped. And we'll look first at how the game progressed to the end, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at some possible variations that White had at its disposal. But I should say right now, though, that White has nothing in this position that's going to stop it from losing the game, which just shows how powerful of a candidate line generator Paul Morphy was. He saw quite deep into this position and was able to come up with just a crushing series of moves here. So once the queen is taken back from the sacrifice, Morphy unleashes the rook and checks on g6. The only square that the king has to go to is h1, and now we're going to see that Morphy's going to bring all of his pieces into the attack. So from here he plays his bishop up to h3, and White plays rook over to d1, and we'll look at some different moves for the rook after we go through the main line here. But after the rook moves, check by Morphy, the king has to go to g1, and then he uses a discovered check by taking the pawn. The king moves now to f1, and instead of taking the rook in this position, he checks again, and White plays over to g1, and now he lines up the bishop on h3, securing that diagonal and unleashing another discovered check. So the king now goes to h1, and now Morphy brings another piece into the action and captures the pawn on f2. And if you take a moment and you look at this position, any other move than queen to f1 loses the game for White, because basically if White were to play, say for example, pawn up from this position, just as an example, it's simply checkmate right there and it's game over. So the only move that White has in this position is simply to bring the queen down to f1, and at which point Morphy comes in and takes the queen, the rook recaptures, and now Morphy comes up with rook to e2, and there's really not a lot of good options in this position for White. So what Paulsen decides to do maybe is just to consolidate his defending pieces and try to get some more power lined up here on his home rank. But from here, Morphy swings his rook over to h6, so now we see we've got a rook attacking the pawn on h2, and the only thing preventing checkmate in this position is this bishop. And once White tries to open up access for the bishop to take the rook here, Morphy, all he has to do in this position is simply to play bishop over to e3, and it's game over. There's nothing that can be done to stop the checkmate that's coming in. So for example, if White captures the bishop, it's just simply check. King has to go to g1, and then it's checkmate. So let's go back now. I want to take a look at some of the possible variations in the game throughout the main line here that was played out. So I'm going to go back to the initial sacrifice, and we'll take a look at what happens after the queen is taken, rook lands a check, king goes to its only possible principal square, and then the bishop is brought up. Now in this position here, there is a possibility of, instead of going rook to d1 to prevent the attack, the rook can come over to g1. But unfortunately for white, this just leads to a quicker checkmate, because after the rook captures, the king has to recapture, and then the rook can slide up here to e1, landing the check, and the only piece that can block is the queen, and then from here it's game over for white. So moving the rook to g1 would have been just catastrophic for white. Now I want to go back to bishop to h3. Now in the match, rook to d1 was played immediately, but I plugged this into the chess engine, and it came up with a line queen to d3 instead of going for an immediate rook to d1. But as it turns out, this isn't much better for white. It does allow white to, I guess you could say, last in the game a little bit longer, but other than that, it's still going to be a victory for black. And the computer engine went as follows. After queen to d3, the engine played pawn up now, because it's stopping the queen from sacking itself by taking the rook. And then from here, white does play rook to d1, but the attack just builds up here with a check. King moves to g1, discovered check again. King moves to f3. Now the bishop comes in to take that rook, and white plays bishop to a3. Black checks, queen captures, and then rook lands a check. King takes, rook captures queen, and from this position, this pawn is pinned. It can't come down to block the bishop, and there's just going to be white pawns getting munched left and right here. And this is a very, very strong position for black. So even with computer assistance, after the queen sacrifice here on f3, it's pretty much game over for white. Now, speaking of engine assistance, I want to take a moment and talk about Morphy's attacking line, because as it turns out, there's an even quicker mate that he missed in those lines. And it took place after Morphy played bishop to h3. And you'll recall from the match that after his opponent played rook to d1, Morphy landed the check, the king went to g1, Morphy captured the pawn, and in this position, after the king went to f1, Morphy checked again with the bishop on g2, which was fine. It was still a winning position, but as the engines show, there's a quicker mate in this position by playing rook up to g2. And basically, there's not a lot of options for white here in this position. One of them is queen to d3, but regardless of what white does in this position, black can simply check with the rook. The rook is being protected by the bishop, so can't be taken. So the king moves off to g1, the only square that it has. And then after rook check on g2, it doesn't matter if the king goes to f1 or h1, it's going to be checkmated either way. For example, king to h1 leads to checkmate here, or alternatively, king to f1 simply leads to checkmate here. So either way, really, it's a victory for black. That would have happened a little bit quicker, but quite honestly, that's really not important when you're looking at this game. Sure, it's there. Sure, there's a quicker mate, but really, the beauty of this game lies in the queen sacrifice, which took place here when Morphy just came crashing into the position with the sack, and after this, it was all over for white. So even though there was a quicker mate that the engine found in Paul Morphy's line, the fact of the matter is that Paul Morphy came up with it, and most importantly, he came up with it in 1857 without the help of computer analysis or programs. So it really just shows how strong of a tactical thinker he was, and not only just a tactical thinker, but just a very strong positional player, and really good at generating candidate moves. I really think that he saw at this point in the game, when I looked at the game history and the lore behind it, it's rumored that he took about 12 minutes to think of the move before he sacked the queen, and I really firmly believe that he could see that there really was no alternatives for white, and that regardless of what white played, he was going to win the match. And I think that that's just really amazing. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and take care, and we'll see you next time.